Wow.
Welcome back to the last edition, unfortunately, of the SteelerFury.com podcast for this 22-23 year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I am your host, Jeremy Coleman. You know me as Smith & Smokin', joined by my fellow colleagues, Will Masek, you know him as Bradshaw to Ben, and Corey Karbowski, you know him as Corey39 on the boards. Gentlemen, as Don Meredith once said, all good things must end, and therefore made a Willie Nelson song more famous probably than it ever would have been. But
turn out the lights. Yeah.
The party's
over.
Actually, the party's not over for 14 other teams out there. They're still chasing the confetti drop. I don't even know where the Super Bowl is this year. That's kind of sad, but it's the truth.
By the way, there's 14 teams left. How many teams do you think there really should be left? Like, how many of those 14 are totally wasting their time? Yeah, about 9.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, 5. But you never know. Once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. We once saw a 2005 Pittsburgh Steelers team that we did not think would go very far, would get out of Indianapolis, that would go on and be the first ever 6 seed to win a Super Bowl. And since then, it has been a lot of fun. We've seen the New York Giants win as a 6 seed twice, I think. So it's all about when you get hot at the right time. So don't count any of these teams out, but you know that there are some obvious favorites there. But let's get back to our Steelers at hand here. A nice win over the Cleveland Browns this past weekend. 28 points. I was shocked. I couldn't believe we scored 28 points. But a 28-14 win. Good things on all sides of the ball. We were able to run the ball. We put Deshaun Watson on his ass a lot, which was awesome. So, guys, how do you like what Pittsburgh did and kind of their, unbeknownst at the time, their wrap-up event of the year?
I mean, Deshaun Watson did us a lot of favors by letting himself get absolutely punished in the pocket. Hey, did he throw one throwaway? I think he just held the ball every time. I mean, Some of the incompletions looked like throwaways, but I think he was just trying to throw to a receiver. But, I mean, the Browns are in big trouble if he plays even close to this next year. I mean, doesn't look like anywhere near what he's getting paid. He didn't look like a top 16 quarterback, even with all the undrafted free agents and rookies playing last weekend. I mean, I think you could plug almost any other QB who played last weekend into that Browns system, and they probably would have performed better than he did that game. But that's not to take away from what our guys did. Highsmith did a good job. We got a lot of interior pressure on them. Cam Hayward, DeMarvin Leal, those guys did a good job collapsing the pocket. And with those scrambling quarterbacks, that's what you've got to do. Sadly for us, Mark Robinson kind of had a down game. He came in for those first 11 snaps, looked like a rookie, looked like an undrafted free agent rookie who is transitioning from running back to linebacker still. But, he still showed he's aggressive and quick to go, and, just has some more things to work on in the offseason. I'm sure we'll gloss on it a little more, but there's going to be a lot of discussion around what Matt Canada has done. So I'm not going to go too far into that. But, it's just, I feel like we have pieces and there's a good game, but the Browns are the Browns. So
I just, Browns ran for like 6 yards to carry and ran only 15 times or something in the game. Like, I just don't really understand what their mentality was for what they were trying to do. It almost feels like they wanted to go in the offseason with Deshaun Watson feeling like he's starting to feel it and they had something to build on going next year, that was their goal for this game more than winning. And of course, no way to know it at the time, but in retrospect, the Steelers winning really didn't do them any favors, cost them 4 or 5, slots in draft position. And I mean, maybe it makes them feel a little better. They had the non-losing season, but I just think all of this stuff is like, it just confuses. It's all a bunch of noise. This is Mike Tomlin thing. It's like, you got to shut out the noise and focus on what's really important. Here's what's really important. They need to get better in a lot of areas. And they are going to go into the offseason feeling like they were this close to getting into the playoffs and the single elimination tournament. And, so that's like this win and beating a lot of these sort of bad and beat up teams in the second half of the season, I think really takes the focus off of where it really ought to be. And I'm worried, I've been sort of pessimistic this whole season about the Steelers rebuilding because they're not geared to rebuild. They're geared to, be in this situation, to quote someone who said it earlier today, to I think it was actually Mark Madden. I can't believe I'm quoting Mark Madden, Pittsburgh sports host, that they're set up to, get to mediocrity and stay there. It's like, get to the mediocre record, draft mediocre slot, and continue to be mediocre for a really long time. Like that's a doable goal, but is that what you really want to be? Do you want to be consistently good at the expense of being great?
Yeah, the word I was going to use for this kind of feeling is superficial. It feels, great that we got a winning season, but kind of like you said, Will, there's a lot of things that this, winning season, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, that it kind of covers up some just glaring holes from this year that going forward, we still have questions for. I know we'll kind of dive into this one right now, but I mean, the biggest thing I think the Steelers have to address is Matt Canada. They've got to decide quickly whether they're going to keep him around or not. And I hate to say it, but the more I think about it, I feel like they're going to stick with him because the Pittsburgh Steelers typically let coaching contracts expire. They don't let them go early. Now, that's not saying that hasn't happened in the past. If in retrospect, if you look at some of the last offensive coordinators that have kind of departed, Todd Haley, Bruce Arians, those guys have actually been let go, not on Black Monday, as the NFL deems it, the Monday after the regular season. They were let go a little later into the week. So I'm not saying it still couldn't happen, but it just feels like, because of the success the running game took on late in the year, the better play of Kenny Pickett down the line, just kind of feels like, Mike Tomlin's going to want to keep what was working in place. Whether, that's super efficient all the time, we're running the ball very well. This team's got to find a way to introduce an explosive passing attack to complement it, and we just don't.
A passive attack is a more apt description of what they do than a passing attack. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a fair assessment, to turn my blunder there into a very true statement. So I mean, just personally, there were times even in this past game, these past few games, where it's like, I know we're going to run the ball, but it's like, shit, we need to throw the ball. We've got to get people off the line. We can't just expect to win at the line of scrimmage every single time. There's professionals that play on the other side of the ball every single time you line up. And let's face it, Steelers closed out with some very, winnable games. We finished off 6-1 across the easiest stretch of our schedule. Those are games I expect Pittsburgh to win. Well, when are we going to get to that status again where we go into games thinking, oh, we can beat this team, not, oh, can we beat this team? It's more like we expect to beat a team rather than hoping we expect to beat a team. So I personally, the Matt Canada thing is the number one thing you have to figure out on what type of offense this is going to look like moving forward. I mean, Will, what do you think about kind of how the offense finished up this year, how it looks heading into next year, assuming that we stay with Matt Canada?
Well, this is what I was alluding to earlier. Like what happened in the last 7-8 games is like, I've moved to the point where I will be shocked if Matt Canada gets fired. I'll tell you, not just what happened in the last 7 games, but here, I'll put it this way. This offense looks exactly like what Mike Tomlin wants the offense to look like. This is his dream. This team he had is probably one of his favorite teams he's ever had because it fits this formula that he really wants to have. And in a way, 2019 and this year really were, I think, in a way more fun for him, right? So they didn't have any expectations. They played super conservative attrition football, keep it close and try to win it at the end. And they won sufficiently at the end to be better than average or better than 500, right? So to me, it's like I don't think Matt Canada's going anywhere because he's doing what Mike Tomlin wants him to do. And besides that, as you said, they usually have these assistants keep them for the duration of their contract. Maybe they won't renew him next year. I don't know, but he's doing, I think, pretty much what the coach wants him to do. So yeah, he could use him as a scapegoat, but that's not the normal operating procedure for the Steelers.
Right, Corey. What are your thoughts on this year's offensive finish? How it looks moving forward?
So, I mean, I won't be like necessarily ignorant. The offense looked better and looked like it was called better towards the end of the year than it was at the beginning. Now that's not a very high bar to pass, but it's what it was. He did call a better game, but if they still weren't great called games. I mean, I do think that part of it is it's what Tomlin wants, and we kind of want to just think of how the Titans win, where they just beat you down with just short passes and running the ball in playing stingy defense that's pretty opportunistic. I think that's what we want to do, and there's maybe a little bit of merit to it, but we are far beyond the passive level that is acceptable to win big games. I mean, you can't just have an offense that can't break big plays. We have the personnel to. Deontay Johnson, I mean, me and Will were talking about it earlier. He is the most open receiver in the NFL.
Number one.
So, number one, yeah, the most open receiver in the NFL. And, I feel like half his targets were on these little sprint outs where we hit him at the line of scrimmage and then he gets 3 yards. Now, don't get me wrong, Deontay Johnson's infuriating sometimes when catching the ball. It's not, there's personnel issues sometimes. But I think Canada can't call plays at a successful NFL level against good teams. I think he's a decent play architect. I mean, pretty much everyone in the NFL runs the same base concepts, and it's, you run different formations. And I feel like there's been some creativity in the red zone and on some third downs, especially as of late. But I mean, that's not the only details in the job description. You've got to be able to call plays throughout the entire game. And I mean, how many weeks did it take to score a first drive offensive touchdown? I mean, that's 100% the offensive coordinator. You come out with a plan. Like, that is 100% the offensive coordinator. Put your guys in the position to succeed on the first drive. So, I've been banging on the table for weeks now. I'm pulling my hair out because Pep Hamilton's actively available right now. And, I'm sure we wouldn't be the only ones, but Todd Monken just called, he has better athletes, but called a phenomenal game against TCU in the national championship game. And those two would be significant upgrades, in my opinion, over Matt Canada. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who agrees. But I'm with Will here. If I had to place my money on it, I'd say Matt Canada stays, and maybe the rest of the next season looks like this season. We'll have one of the easier schedules in the NFL, but it's still not going to be enough to make anything past a potential wild card round, or especially not the divisional round. It's just, you can't win being this passive.
By the way, this thing about the Steelers not having a playoff win in many years. I guess it's the longest stretch without a playoff win since Franco Harris joined the team, to give you an idea. And the thing about losing the playoff games is not only this, but some of it at least is because they're not entering as entering the playoffs as the favorite. I think one of their playoff losses, they were the favorite. They lost to Jacksonville. But for the most part, these are teams that are sneaking into the playoffs that maybe don't even really, deserve. You make the playoffs, you deserve to be there. But they're not really getting into the playoffs as, big contenders on a hot streak. So the thing about next year is if it does turn out to be a really soft schedule, and I think this is the kind of thing we thought this schedule this year was going to be a lot worse it was. And if you looked at what it was like coming down the stretch, it didn't really seem all that hard. So things change and people get hurt and they change quarterbacks or they change coaches. And, so I'm not going to say it's definitely an easy schedule, but it's easy enough that they should be stockpiling wins early in the season so that they don't have to do the same kind of thing, make a big run late, and be at the mercy of, other things. As far as the offensive coordinator is concerned, being a good offensive coordinator is working with what you have, and maybe that's true. But I also feel like somewhere between what the head coach wants to do as far as being risk averse and how the quarterback has now got it drilled into his head to be risk averse. They didn't throw very many interceptions, but there were 3 passes in an entire NFL season, which in this season was 17 games. There were 3 passes that Steelers quarterbacks threw this year that netted 40 yards or more. 3. Does that sound like a lot to you guys? Because that does not sound like a lot to me. So whether it's, quarterbacks who are so convinced, to not take a risk that they won't throw to guys, down the field, or if it is a young quarterback getting sort of locked onto his first read as the year went on and missing wide open guys like in the last game. I don't know. Like, I think it's some is the coordinator and some is the head coach's mentality that they get trained with, and some is the quarterbacks, so I kind of feel like, yes, changing the offensive coordinator, in my opinion, would be better. But if you don't change the head coach, you couldn't even really evaluate if it's the quarterback. Like, in other words, you change Randy Fichtner. Like, we were really concerned with Randy Fichtner was going, and he was not competent. He was not a good coordinator. And you swapped him out, and it's like the window dressing is a little bit different on the front facing side of the offense, but the net effect of what they're doing is very similar. I think either of you guys articulate to me what the difference is between the Randy Fichtner offense and Matt Canada's offense, other than sort of like the jet sweep action.
More split zone,
yeah,
which is not a plus.
Yeah. More split zone and no Big Ben Roethlisberger to run an offense.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest, damning thing is, even Ben didn't want to run this system. Kenny Pickett at times late in the year has looked very frustrated with the play call. But we mentioned it, a few times last week, after the Ravens game, he basically called several of his own plays on that drive to go down and win the game. You have to wonder, and really just in general, because the players were pretty fed up at one point too. If the players don't believe in their offensive coordinator, I feel like you almost have to make a change, because if you don't think Matt Canada is putting you in the best chance to succeed, well, what's the motivation to stay in Pittsburgh, other than just to honor the contract that you have before you leave? You don't want to create an environment where it's like offensively players are like, well, shoot, I'm never gonna, make a big season or career here, in this type of offense. I'm not going to be very interested in, signing with Pittsburgh again after my contract's up. And conversely, free agent wise, who do you want, who's going to want to come here to, do this type of offense? So just another question to ponder there. But Will, kind of sorry, Corey, what were you saying there, Will?
I don't want to play the if your aunt's your uncle kind of game where, if you take away this part, then what do you get here? But I just want to pose the question, like, outside of jet sweeps, because there were some jet sweeps where we had guys running pretty open after that. Outside of jet sweeps, can anyone think of a single play this season where someone was schemed open, where a receiver, a running back, a tight end was schemed open?
I could think of 2 examples that were not just standard NFL play calls that weren't played right by the defense. Like, in other words, if you run arrow and you've got 2 receivers, clearing down the field and a guy cuts underneath them, if you don't play that well in the NFL, a play that people run multiple times every game, then yes, a guy is going to come wide open, that kind of thing. Aside from that, I thought that the only two plays that guys were really schemed wide open that I can think of off the top of my head were, one of them was a jet sweep. The Connor Hayward play, steal the game 2 weeks ago. Like that was an excellent play call. Love it.
Yes.
The other would have been the Pickens touchdown to win the Raiders game. And to me, that only worked because it's like the defense is like, that guy's never coming into the middle. Don't worry. It's almost like the U-shaped offense of avoiding the middle of the field just worked in their favor for that play, because it was like no one who could have seen that coming. Like, so yeah, if that answers your question, that would be my impression.
Because any other deep ball, there were multiple coverage busts, but I don't consider blatant coverage. There's a difference between the coverage busting and you scheming someone out of position. They're the only other. The one this week was a coverage bust, and we didn't have that many big plays. You don't have to draw too far in the memory bank for thinking.
You could scheme into coverage busts though, like Monken last night. If they work the routes in such a way that it can be confusing for the defenders, then I count that. But I don't think they're doing anything. Like I rarely saw the Steelers this year do something in the passing game that was something that wasn't stock, like one of their 5 passing plays that everybody runs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I agree with you guys. There's no scheming anyone open. It's just kind of goes back to the Matt Cannon just not having a good flow as far as play calling goes, trying to get people open, with certain route combinations, all the above really. So
how many OCs would have the balls to call a tight end screen to Zach Gentry for a 2-yard gain?
I don't know, but we called it way too damn much.
How many people would dare to do such a play?
2nd and 15, Fickner loved to run that 2-yard out to the tight end. That was called multiple times in his tenure.
Yeah, he just replaced that with our 5-yard Deontay out.
Right.
But this is something I said to Corey earlier today. Here's the problem with replacing the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh is who the hell, if you have any promise to your career as an offensive coordinator, why would you want to come to Pittsburgh? Like, it's where offensive coordinators go to die and be criticized and endlessly and have your house toilet papered and whatever, right? Like, who would want to come? I think replacing him at this point could be tricky. It might be difficult to find somebody that wants to come who isn't a retread or, nobody else wants them, kind of or someone from the staff, God forbid, be Mike Sullivan or whatever.
Todd Monken would be a good retread though. That's just my belief. Even because he is actually a retread just because he's coached for every AFC North team, I believe, but the Steelers. So
yeah.
All right. So we're all kind of in agreement with the offense here. So philosophy wise going forward for this offense, we have our young quarterback of the future. We have 2 good wide receivers in Deontay and George Pickens. We have a pretty good tight end in Pat Freiermuth. I'll be gracious and say a developing offensive line, as well as underwhelming at times. So some good running backs. So what would be more beneficial to this offense? A dynamic 3rd wide receiver or a really good 2nd tight end? Because right now, Steven Sims is a restricted free agent. He made some plays when we needed him to. Tanner Gentry is also a unrestricted free agent. So both those guys, could be moving on this offseason. Ideally, who do you think is more important to replace for this team and for a Matt Canada offense moving forward?
I would say 3rd wide receiver, just because I feel like unless you draft an elite 2nd tight end, so Darnell Washington could automatically be our 1st tight end, so that bumped Pat to 2. But I would say a 3rd tight end just because Calvin Austin has a ton of potential. Sauce Gardner, probably the defensive rookie of the year, said he was his toughest guard in college. But you don't know what you have in him. He's small, could possibly have more injury issues pop up. Haven't seen him play as a NFL receiver. So, I mean, anyone almost would be an upgrade over Steven Sims and Gunnar Olszewski. I mean, they do their job, I guess, in the offense, but they aren't asked to do a lot, which is good because they're not, high-level NFL receivers. I think Connor Hayward definitely has something as a tight end too. I feel like he's a guy who you really have to scheme with, but I think that he's a good enough player that he warrants it. I mean, he's good after the catch. He's shifty on linebackers. He's a relatively tough guard. So I feel like he warrants getting play scheme for him. So I'm going to lean towards receiver, but I mean, if you could get a dominant blocking tight end, I mean, that would do a lot to help boost the running game. That's always been a criticism of Pat. He's been solid for us, but he's not a road paver by any means. But I think I'll definitely lean towards receiver just from what we have now.
Yeah, Will, how do you feel about this?
I think, well, when you think of the context of what it is that they want to do offensively, that a tight end is way more important for this offense, because they, as much as they want to run the ball and the way that they want to run it, I feel like having an inline tight end to go along with Pat's, nice. He's literally a move tight end, not because you move him around, but because you blocking in the run game, you want him on the move, coming around and blocking smaller players, because he's very good at that. I'll almost go as far as to say he can be elite at that task. He hits targets on the move and smaller targets, as well as any tight end that I can think of in the league right now. The thing that he is not really built to do is bang on big guys his size or bigger, over and over and over again as an inline tight end. That's a waste of what his talent is. And it probably takes away from him being able to be, more of a receiving threat, right? So for me, I think they should run a lot more 2 tight end sets, and they should do it with 2 tight ends that are both threats in the pass game and both have blocking roles that they're good at. So to me, I would love to add a guy that he either has some nastiness to him as a blocker that I can teach to be better, or who has some obvious physical advantage as a blocker. Because if you take some of the pressure off of Pat and you add that element of blocking, I think the sacrifice that you give up by not having a third wide receiver on the field all the time is fine. And you don't know what you have yet at that third wide receiver spot from Calvin Austin, but you may have something from him that's actually special when you get him on the field. So I like the idea of mixing and matching personnel, but I think the Steelers base set should be 2 tight end. Even Arians at one point, I think, wanted the Steelers base set to be 2 tight end, and they just didn't really have the guys for it. For just like a year, they had sort of peak Matt Spaeth, and it seemed to work pretty well. Just because he used to say that was the most difficult thing for defenses to defend, was when you have 2 tight ends who are really good at both jobs of catching and blocking. That was tougher than a third wide receiver or a fullback in the game.
Yeah, I mean, you both have good points there. I guess personally, I'd like to see a dynamic wide receiver, because I'd like to see Pittsburgh play some more of an importance on getting the ball down the field. But I lean towards tight end, just kind of seeing this offense this past year. So it's like I want a really nice, explosive wide receiver that makes everyone look bad. But, I definitely think, spending, that late first round pick on a guy like Darnell Washington could really make this offense tough to defend, just because Darnell's a good receiver too. So just a very interesting kind of philosophical point moving forward, on where this offense improves, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to think that Pittsburgh also believes that the offensive line is going to stay intact next year. Like, they're going to draft a guy, to try and improve this line. I'm not sure where, just because I feel like we can get better at both tackle spots and left guard. Really, I think any position across the board can be upgraded, but with what they've seen over the last half this year, I think they're going to be confident that they can get to that level of play plus improvement. So as much as I'd like to see that, first round left tackle in there, to be a shiny new blindside protector for Kenny Pickett for the future, I definitely feel like that they like where the offensive line is at this time. I don't know where you guys fall on that.
Well, that's kind of the thing I was saying earlier. Like, I mean, I posed it to you this way, and I'll throw this a question to Corey to give him a chance to talk because I'm dominating the conversation. But like who are the most? We can just stick with offense for a second. But who would be the hardest players on the Steelers offense to upgrade? Because I don't think there's really anybody on the Steelers offense except for, maybe George Pickens that I think is really hard to upgrade. Maybe Deontay Johnson and Kenny Pickett just because of scarcity of opportunities to get guys like that. But wonder what your thought is. Like, where are the positions that are the hardest to upgrade? And maybe that'll guide us to where we think we got to change.
I feel like you'd be hard-nosed to find a guy who could do what Pat does. I feel like you nailed it with Pickens and Deontay. I feel like unless you're taking a first-round pick, you're probably not going to get a guy better than James Daniels, at least for if you're not getting someone in the first or, pick 32, which is essentially a first round. Again, Kenny Pickett, scarcity of opportunity. I mean, running back's a revolving door. I mean, we spent the first round capital on Najee. He's not going to be replaced. But other than James Daniels, I feel like every position on that line could be replaced with even a third round pick with what's in the draft. And it's not even like it's an insane class for O linemen. I mean, I like the center depth, but it's just not a very great O line. It's okay. I think one thing that's really, people defend Chucks and Dan Moore. Dan Moore's really gets it bad, but Chucks has his defenders. And I think here's why they both get a little bit of slack from some people is if you look at Dan Moore's run blocking, it's actually pretty good. Dan Moore is a good run blocker. If you look at Chuck's pass protection, Chuck's is a pretty good pass protector. But Dan Moore is a horrendous pass blocker, and Chuck's is a horrendous run blocker. So, there's good things that they do. Like, it's not like they're all horrible, but both of them suck at half the game. So, suck might be aggressive, but they're not very polished is, a kinder way to put it. And then Mason Cole, I mean, we don't know how many injuries he's battling all year. I mean, he was good. He was a lot better than Kendrick Green, but I mean, he's pretty upgradable, I'd say. And then Kevin Dotson, he's hot and cold. It's he's, I still think his natural position is right guard, but if we were going to make that switch, we would have done it in the offseason. So, I mean, that's, water under the bridge. But Kevin Dotson has some good rush blocking or good run blocking wins, good pass blocking wins. But then sometimes you just see, he's 320 pounds and he's laying on his back in the backfield. Like, it's just, there's some inexplicable balance issues with him that just show up out of nowhere and he gets hammered for some bad losses. So I mean, fullback Derek Watt does his job, I guess. I mean, I'm not really sure it's worth the capital to replace him.
The highest graded Pro Football Focus fullback.
Derek Watt is? I mean, whatever he's in, I feel like he does his job. I'd be open to
4 or 5 snaps a game he averaged.
Right.
I feel like when I see him, he does his job, but he's not worth the money, but I'm sure that's going to be addressed with, whenever we get to this offseason. I don't see him getting paid as much as he will. But, I mean, third receiver obviously could be addressed. Second tight end, Connor Hayward has a role, probably better as a third guy. So the whole offense, I mean, there's pieces, there's things to like, and if you got a guy in who could use them, we'd probably have a pretty damn good offense with the pieces we currently have. But we definitely have room for upgrades damn near across the board.
This is the Phyllis, if I'm sitting down for the end of the year meetings in the Steelers offices, you just have to think to yourself, do we think we're close and we're just trying to add some pieces to get better so that we can, make the playoffs next year and contend or whatever? Or are we in need of really raising the talent level on the team, because I think your approach to doing one or the other would change. Your approach might change in terms of what kind of free agents you brought in or whatever. So like, I think the thing about thinking like you're always close and you're just one piece away is really dangerous unless you really are one piece away and really close. Like if I'm the San Francisco 49ers and my young rookie quarterback falls down to earth in the postseason and it costs us the Super Bowl, then yeah, I'm thinking to myself, what do I have to do to get a quarterback that can take us over the top, because we have everything else. The Steelers, I don't think, are in that boat. I think they think they're more like that boat, and we think they're more like, okay, we need a couple of years of upgrading, even positions that are filled with a starter that's not terrible. We can still upgrade there and get a lot better. So I think it makes a big difference to your team if your offensive line is not just okay, but is actually great. That probably makes more of a difference with your team than almost anything. So I'm willing to invest a lot in improving the offensive line from where they are this year, but there's risk involved with that in the short term. It takes a little while for guys to work together, and those other guys have played every game together this year and most every snap. So there's risk involved. They're not too big on risk. I'm bigger on risk.
Yeah, Will, I'm gonna use that to kind of transition to the other side of the ball. Pittsburgh has a lot of holes on defense coming up here. Inside linebackers one, corners one. I mean, strong safety. I mean, shoot, we don't have like anyone under contract, heading into the offseason. I know it, that Terrell Edmonds and DeMonte Casey have already said they'd like to be back, which is, encouraging, that they want to be back and be a part of this. But, as it stands, there is no strong safety right now. At inside linebacker, we're down to Miles Jack, who couldn't finish the year, and Mark Robinson, for the most part. Spillane, Bush, they're both free agents. Bush, see you later, pal. Don't give a shit. Corner, Cam Sutton, was kind of on that weird option deal where it's like we gave him a 2-year deal, but it was basically a 1-year deal.
No, that's a year. He has to be re-signed basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna have to bring him
back. So I mean, but then you've got Akella Witherspoon, who basically didn't play all year. I mean, let's face it, he played like the first 3 or 4 games, could never get over his hamstring injury. Steelers traded for William Jackson, who didn't even pass a physical, and
he's not making it past the cuts. It's too much money.
What you're saying to me is that they have Minkah Fitzpatrick and Trey Norwood, right? And I mean, Arthur Wallett might be theoretically under contract. I'm not sure what his contract status is.
He's still under contract.
But I'm not even sure that he's worth talking about. Like, I think this is, so that like today's revelation for me was just thinking to myself, oh my God, like maybe they really will take cornerback first in the draft, because their cupboard is bare, man. Last year, the way I heard it was that there was some bad blood between Cam Sutton and the front office negotiating his deal, which is how they ended up where they ended up, and that he thought he should be paid a lot more than that. And
he showed it this year. Stats back it up.
Yeah, I mean, played really well. So I think now it's like he's really going to get paid. I'm not sure he's going to get paid in Pittsburgh. So if they don't bring back Sutton, and frankly, they have some cap space, and once they cut guys, they'll have enough to make moves and whatever. But like people were talking about the Edmonds brothers, you re-sign Terrell and maybe you get his brother to come.
Yeah.
If you do that, that uses up pretty much all of your major cash. So I'm not sure anybody else is going to get big money. So that makes me wonder if they would even be able to afford Sutton if they did such a thing. And being the Steelers, having the Edmonds brothers might be more important to them than Cap.
I almost consider that a done deal. Terrell Edmonds wants to stay. Tremaine has, I've read it. I can't give anyone an exact source, but I know that he's been open to, moving out of Buffalo. I think Buffalo was, they know they're going to have to pay Matt Milano coming up. So I'd almost consider this a done deal. It's going to fill need. I mean, there's the conspiracy theory that, Tomlin loved Tremaine so much that he drafted Terrell because he missed out on him. And it almost makes sense because if you spend that much time around a family, you fall in love with the people, it makes sense. And, Terrell's played good football, people who, still dunk on him for his rookie year, it's water under the bridge. He's played good. But I think one thing that's kind of interesting to look at this defense is you can still tell they don't exactly have the personnel to do what they want to do. So they're obviously missing a slot. I mean, that's been all Arthur Millette does.
They value the slot when they had him. They didn't want to pay him for like 4 years running or whatever it was.
Yeah,
he didn't even demand a lot. But Cam Sutton, he was a great cover corner this year. I think Levi Wallace was a solid 2. I mean, that's the thing. That's what he was in Buffalo. That's what he was here. I feel like, he was a good addition. He wasn't giving up huge plays. I mean, for the most part, he did his job. I mean, there's only 1 or 2 games where you see more than one elite receiver. And, for the value his contract gives, it's tough to find what's much better than him. I think one thing that's, something to ponder, at least with Cam Sutton, is if his deal was with Kevin Colbert or if it was with someone else in the organization, because it could very well be that Omar Khan is much more willing to pay Cam Sutton than Kevin Colbert was. So that's one thing to at least keep in the back of your head. Devontae Casey, I think something interesting is that we kind of thought that he'd be used more as a slot this year, which was not the case. It was much more that Edmonds would play in the box and Casey would play at the top. And I think Casey played some good football. We were all fans of the Casey signing. So I'd be surprised if it turned out any other way. This is what I'm going to assume is that we're going to go into, we're going to come out of free agency. We're going to have the Edmonds brothers. We're going to have Casey back on the books. I think we're going to sign Sutton. I think we're just going to dump all the money in the defense. I mean, I don't think we have anyone on offense we even have to pay, do we?
Not yet.
Nope.
Gentry.
I don't think we. Oh, big bucks. We'll give him a Derek Watt contract.
Corey, not to throw more, fuel on the fire, with the whole, maybe Tremaine Edmonds comes to Pittsburgh thing. It is worth noting that the Bills have one of the worst cap situations heading into 2023. As of right now, they are projected to be $5 million over the cap. Now, obviously the cap goes up every year. That might not be the case as you go out. There's guys that retire, guys you cut, to make moves. I mean, shoot, Kevin Colbert was like the master of restructuring and whatnot, which kind of brings me to my
Ben
next
for another
point.
15 years.
Well, and not only that, but they'll be able to lament their lack of cap space while they look at their Super Bowl ring. It should be fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you cash in all your chips and you win the big one. No one cares how much you spent or what you did to get there. So, I mean, shoot, just look at the Rams. They did it for 1 year. They got what they needed to. And,
totally worth it, right? I mean, who cares what games they won this year, really?
Right.
Like, I would totally trade this season and what's coming for the next season, let's say, for that Super Bowl win. That was awesome.
Right. Mm-hmm. But so I was kind of transitioning to, Cameron Hayward has made some interesting comments. He knows that he's got a big cap hit this offseason. He said publicly a few times, I hope they bring me back, almost like he's expecting to get cut because he knows that they can save like $11 million. They end up cutting him or something like that. I mean, me personally, I would think that extending Cam Hayward's got to be pretty high up there on the line of priorities. I know Cameron Hayward's getting old, but I mean, this is the true heart and soul leader of this Pittsburgh Steelers team right now. He's the guy everyone goes to for the soundbite. He's the one that, gets this defense ready to play. I would have to think that there's, a small extension coming for him, hopefully kind of more of a team friendly deal. He's made a lot of money on his contract too, with the Steelers or whatever, but hopefully that's coming. But that's a position group we haven't really talked about yet as far as defensive line goes. We're not going to bring Tyson Aluala back. The guy's done. His lower leg injuries have sapped him of what's really made him special. On the other hand, we do have a nice, promising young player in DeMarvin Leal, who will, probably de facto start next year because we need someone like him starting on defense. But then, outside of that, we don't really have anyone of note under contract. It's worth noting that Larry Ogunjobi is going to be a free agent. I think Pittsburgh had him on a 1-year deal that was pretty affordable this year. So it'll be interesting to see if he's, potentially in their future plans, because he played some nice football at times this year. He's not a great run stuffer, but boy, he can really get up the field when given the opportunity. But outside of that, it's a bunch of guys like retreads like Carlos Davis, who finds a way to stick around from time to time. Isaiah Loudermilk, Chris Wormley, who tore his ACL, but highly unlikely he'll be back just because of that recovery time frame. And Pittsburgh's going to need to kind of have more of their ducks in a row. He's a long way off from playing football. So kind of another philosophy question to you guys. Does Pittsburgh need to go out there and get that old traditional run stuffing nose tackle for a change to free up the inside linebackers to allow them to make more plays and allow them not to be on blocks as much? Or do we go get another good to great all around guy who can hold up against the run and rush the passer and kind of do it all?
So I'll start. I'm kind of in the mentality of going for that 0-and-1 technique. It's on record that Cam Hayward hates playing in there, and he gives us some good reps in there, but it is not his preferred position. It's not his best position. He loves eating up that 3 technique on the left guard. I think a big thing is we've notoriously been ran on, and I don't think bringing in another outside guy necessarily fixes that, because someone has to go inside, whether it's Liao, Hayward, this new guy we bring in. And I think, me and Will talked about it earlier, and, there's just certain things that a good zero technique guy and a good run stuffer just does for you, where, instead of getting single blocked on a stunt where he's trying to eat up the center and the guard can slide and pick him up, and, one of the linebackers blitzing can now get picked up. If you can demand a double team, the linebacker runs free. So I'm just, with how the division plays, and, even the Bengals, who are pass happy, Joe Mixon can run it down your throat if they want to. With how the division plays and, how bad we've been, and considering really we only have Montravius Adams, who really fits that role, and even then he's solid at best at, demanding a double team inside. I think I would lean towards 0-or-1 technique, but those are a dime a dozen. Those are rare. So, I'm not going to, throw a fit if we don't get one, because I get those guys aren't easy to come around.
Thank you for bringing up Montravius Adams. That's a name I forgot. He's under contract for 1 more year, so he'll be in Pittsburgh too. Go ahead, Will.
Best of the backup.
On the last of the final cut downs, and people will be lamenting that they had to cut Montravius Adams. I just don't feel like the contributions were enough that he couldn't be replaced. I thought that at times when he first came in last year, he played really well, but that's a long time ago in NFL terms. To Corey's point, it was more a question of, do you want someone who's more like Javon Hargrave, who's playing the nose position, but who is doing it by being a really disruptive penetrator, versus someone who's just like, they're a wall, like Haloti Ngata was just like, like a wall, basically. So if you try to run anywhere near him, you had to run around him, Ted Washington, guys like that. The thing about Nada, though, and this is also theoretically true of Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt from last year, it's like if you get a guy that's big as a house, who also can give you some pass rush juice on early downs where the teams are going to try to pass against you if you have a 350-pound guy on the field. Those guys, I think, are a bit rare. I don't think the Steelers have a shot at getting Jalen Carter this year. It's probably going to be no worse than the 3rd pick in the draft, probably.
Right.
But beyond that, it's like it's if you're trying to get that guy, then you have to pretty much commit that that's going to happen early in your draft. I mean, maybe they could get a guy like that at 32, but I think even that's a stretch. I think probably, anyone who is capable of being a great run stuffer and has pass rush juice is probably going to go before that. So you sort of kind of have to commit. And, they're not going to trade down in all likelihood. They never do. So it's kind of like people are going to say, well, it's not good value to take this player at pick 17. But the truth is, if it's what you really need and they're really hard to get, I think it's the right draft slot for a player like that. So I wouldn't, I expect this draft to be really defense heavy. And as much as I would love to grab a left tackle, who can be dominating early, I think there's an excellent chance that first pick will be either cornerback or a nose tackle or a zero technique or one technique. I just feel like that's the way the Steelers are shaping up right now, that one of those two cats is going to be the first pick, if not the first two picks.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. The only guys that jump off the page, really this draft class, as far as size go, is the Baylor kid, Siaki Ika. Just talk about a mountain of a man, 6'4", 351. I mean, that's, your Ted Washington, your Casey Hampton type nose tackle that allows you to, have other guys thrive off of just what he can bring to the table, just from a physical standpoint. And then, I feel like there's a bunch of guys that are more like 34 defensive ends this year, with a Brian Brissy, a Gervin Dexter, those type of guys. I feel like the only guy late that really fits that bill, or not even late, who will definitely be a day two guy, is Mozzie Smith from Michigan. He's got the size. He is quick. I don't know if he's elite quick, but that kind of fits your mold more.
Ozzie Smith was a Feldman freak, I think.
Yeah,
I recall.
Yes, he was.
He was.
He's pretty athletic. One thing about him that I did learn this week was that the people can't always trust analytic numbers that you see where somebody says, according to this metric, this guy was this against the run or this against pass, whatever. But apparently Mozzie Smith was the only, or shouldn't say that, he was the best overall interior defensive lineman versus run and pass. So in terms of pass rush and run defense. So he was kind of, I think he was second in one and third in the other or something. And there, even the next best was like first in one and fifth in the other or something like that. So I don't know, it's an interesting name. There's also Jared Clark from Coastal, who I think is sort of fits that mold. But how good a fit they are and how much they're really giving you other than run stopping is an open question. That's I don't know. It's like, I think you can see it a little bit in their college tape, but the college game is so different with this, the more emphasis on spreading offenses and more emphasis on getting the ball out quickly. Those interior defenders versus the pass, they haven't got the same kind of opportunity to showcase what they can really do, I think.
Yep, that's fair. So just kind of really looking at this team, I think we would all agree it's definitely a lot more of, we need to retool rather than just plug a few holes. Kind of going back to your question earlier, Will, whether they think they're close enough just to plug a few holes, or do we need to do more of a wholesale change to really elevate this team to the next level? I know all three of us are in that line of thinking. With that being said, Corey, I know you already said, you think Tremaine Edmonds could be, one of Pittsburgh's big offseason signings. I'm going to go for a different position, just if you guys have someone in mind who the Steelers might be interested in. I think Jamel Dean might be a really good fit here in Pittsburgh, especially if, Will, like you said, if there's some contention between Cam Sutton and what he thinks he should get paid, at least we know Jamel Dean is, an exemplary outside corner, with size who can really run, that has the production. I think you could see a guy like that come up to Pittsburgh potentially. Because I one, not to get too far off the Steelers here, but it's going to be really interesting what happens in Tampa Bay, because it sure feels like, this is going to be Tom Brady's last year. So how much of that defense do they keep intact, and how much do they need to reinvest into the offense a little bit? So I kind of like Jamel Dean kind of as that higher priced free agent that Pittsburgh could go after. Will, do you I know it's kind of momentarily here, is there anyone kind of off the top of your head that you'd like to see in Pittsburgh?
Well, actually, I agree with you. I think Dean is kind of a good fit. He got lost a little bit in the shuffle of his draft year because there were some really good corners in that draft. Just looking at the guys who got taken above him, and there's a lot of good starters in there. So I feel like, I'd be surprised, I think, actually, if Tampa Bay lets him go. I know that their situation is really in flux because they don't know if Tom Brady is going to come back, and there's a lot of uncertainties. But I think he's a really good fit there for what they do. So it depends. If you're a player and you're just like, you just want to get paid, that's one thing. If you recognize that you're in a good situation, not necessarily you're going to win the Super Bowl next year, but you're in a good situation where you fit very well in the defense you're on, and the coaches like you, and you like. He strikes me as a guy that might not move because of that. But yeah, I could see him being an upgrade. I'm not sure. Do we really think of him as a number one corner? To me, again, he's a sort of like a, they kind of have like two number twos there, I feel like, in Tampa.
Yeah, but I mean, Pittsburgh, has had two number twos for a really long time. So that kind of fits with what their line of thinking.
Trade from Witherspoon. At Witherspoon peak, probably not, but in terms of the best ability, which, as you know, is availability.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Pittsburgh does there. Corey, and I don't want to assume Tremaine Edmonds would be your pick, but if there was a notable free agent that was becoming available, who would you like in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, there's this nose guard that I think would really fit in with like the city, and I see Will laughing. He knows where this is going.
I know where this is going too.
I think Javon Hargrave would really be a good fit with the Steelers. He brings what they want from a nose guard. I think he's a good culture fit.
What they need, though. You're really contradicting.
I think he gives you some good run stopping where he can shoot the gap. I think he's a good interior pass rusher. Just has a lot of the things that the Steelers need. I could really see him in a Steelers uniform. That's one guy that just can't leave my head.
Yeah, you beat me to it, Corey. If you weren't going to say that, I was definitely going to bring that up. I mean, honestly,
I didn't see an open question for like any free agent. I thought you meant in terms of cornerbacks, but okay.
No,
that's fine.
Any free agent.
I'll let you
Is there a different free agent, Will, that you'd like to see in Pittsburgh, just to give you that opportunity?
Tom Brady. No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't do that to Tom. No, I think that's a pretty good choice. I don't, it's like, I'll be honest with you. I haven't really poured through the list of who the available free agents are right now. I'm sort of like just getting over the season and just starting, to get a little bit fuller into the draft. I keep saying every year I'm not going to get into it, and I'm not going to spend all this time. And then you get somebody like Corey who's like, he's like the equivalent of like your training partner who calls you at 4 o'clock in the morning and is like, "Hey man, yet I'm working. I'm at the gym." So that's kind of him. He's like, watching film of Fordham. Or whatever. I feel guilty that I'm not.
But I mean,
ask me about free agents. So Jeremy, if you want to hit me up about free agents at 4:30 in the morning, I'll be happy to get more into it.
My ass will be asleep, sir. I'll leave the late morning training to Corey to get you ready for this off.
The other and early, it was it's like a midnight something, and then it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, dude, slow down. Gonna hurt you.
No, I hear that. I had a rule in college, when I was there, that if anyone called me before 9, you were dead to me. On a Saturday morning, it's like, if you call me before 9, you're dead to me. Like, don't do that. So Corey, just lesson learned. Don't do that no more. We older folk value our sleeps.
My age and anyway, so that's the thing.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that'd be my big ploy, honestly. Corey, I think Javon Hargrave would make a lot of sense, and honestly, that's why I'd go to Cam Hayward. I'd say, look, we can save a lot of money if we extend you, bring you back for a few more years. But the money we save you is going to go to your old running mate, here from a few years ago, Javon Hargrave. It'll really do a whole lot to just help free everything up, just because Javon Hargrave is such a damn good player. I was so pissed, when we let him walk. I hate.
Wasn't him and Mike Hilton in the same offseason?
Stephon Tuitt.
Yeah, they chose to.
That was choice. They chose between the two of them, and they chose Tuitt.
With hindsight, you can say what you want, but that was the right choice at the time.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It definitely was. It sucks that, it didn't work out with Tuitt, long term, because he was a hell of a player when he was healthy and dialed in. But I just think Javon Hargrave would do a lot for DeMarvin Leal too. You have a front three of Hargrave, Hayward, and Leal. I mean, that's going to keep a lot of, offensive coordinators up when you plan for the Steelers or whatever. But
good, man. Pretty dang good.
Yeah.
What do you think about Deron? What do you think about Deron Payne as a guy to fill that role? How does he fit for you?
I feel like I like him as a player. I think he would be a really good fit. I think the question is, how much does he want to get paid? Because at least Javon Hargrave went out and got that 4-year, like $70 million deal and has been paid, the once or whatever. So I feel like you might be able to get Hargrave on a little bit of a cheaper deal. I don't know. But, Deron Payne right off his rookie contract, I think he's going to be asking for the, the stars and the moon. So it's not that I don't like him. I just think he's going to cost way more potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I don't know. That's an interesting topic for its own right, because Hargrave, much better pass rusher, than Payne, if you ask me or whatever, just more explosive. But both very good at what they do. So,
all right, I'll throw one more thing at you. Granted, he's 33 years old, and Tremaine Edmonds is still like, what, 26 or 27? He's ridiculously young.
25 right? Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stupid how young he is. But if you could sign Levante David for the same amount of money, would you do it?
I don't think so.
David's like 32, and he's like 32, 33.
From what I've seen from like the Bucks end, it sounds like he's lost a little bit of a step. And I feel like that would only increase if we could sign it for cheaper. I mean, that's a different story, but same price for the two. I think you definitely lean towards Edmonds.
Yeah. I'm just I think Edmonds, he does a little bit of everything. I'm not really sure what the thing is that he does. The single thing that he does, it's like his real calling card.
Yeah.
So, that to me is a little bit of a dangerous thing. If you pair him with another linebacker who's more of a playmaker, does stuff, it's like, then I feel like it could make sense. But I feel like if you're going to sign him for big money, then he's going to be on the field for 3 downs, and he de facto turns into your coverage linebacker. And I'm not really sure that's a fit for him. So yeah, concern. I think as you do, that it's more or less a done deal, but I'm not sure that puts him in a great position. But I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again.
Honestly, just kind of looking this team over as a whole, I think the most upgradable spot right away is corner. To me, I just feel like if you go out there and get that elite level corner that can, erase one side of the field, I think that does wonders for our defense. And honestly, we haven't had that since Ike Taylor, left all those years ago. It's crazy to think that, just because it feels like it's been forever since Ike Taylor played football or whatever. But he's the last true number one guy that's been able to match up with everyone across from him, run with him, stay with him. Never had the interception numbers to back it up, or else he'd probably be in talks for a Hall of Fame nod if he did, just with how good he was. But I still think corner, and the fact that Joey Porter Jr. is going to probably be available just screams typical Steeler pick. I know the draft's a long way off. We haven't even seen free agency. We haven't even done a combine yet. But nothing like some good old fashioned Steelers nepotism, to get, but we're already talking about it with Tremaine Edmonds coming over and it being a done deal. Why the hell would we not take, Joey Porter's son to Pittsburgh? So, but
we need Hayward from Duke and Zach Pickens from South Carolina. We'll load up with Watts and Pickens and Pickett's and Edmonds.
We'll just make it as frustrating as and possibly hard for every announcer out there to know who's playing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to what you're saying is, yeah, that's why the free agency will be a little interesting, because it'll definitely change our opinion a little bit about the draft. But I think if you sign a big name linebacker, you might not have the money to sign a big name corner to be your number one. So then corner becomes more of an immediate need at the top of the draft, which is a big risk for the Steelers. They never seem to draft corners very well when they draft high, or low for that matter. And fine if you don't sign a Javon Hargrave, then they're thin at that position as well, and that becomes a priority. So yeah, gets me right back to, we know those three spots are all thin: the inside linebacker, cornerback, and defensive line. And it's just a question of what things can you address in free agency and which things can you get in the draft without sacrificing other things that you need. But I don't know, they're going to do stuff and it's going to make hopefully some improvement if they have a good class. But I'm not sure that any of it is really like this. Well, we're going to have this big draft, and this year we're going to hit the heights. So it's all good. All the investment in everything is great. Investment in big people is never bad, because even when they get older, they're still big, as Doug Moe, the coach of the Nuggets, used to say.
Right. I mean, it's worth noting that, not to dive too far into an offseason strategy or whatever, but if William Jackson's going to be an obvious cut right away, saves $12.5 million. With Trubisky's latest comments about kind of regretting to sign in Pittsburgh, I think he'll be cut or traded, one of the two. Personally, that's another $8 million. You get Cam Hayward to restructure, could save up to $11 million. All of a sudden, the Steelers, that are projected to have $17 million in cap space this offseason. Now, I'm not sure if that's a $17 million projected with the $5 million that they did not spend this year or not. It probably includes it. And for this scenario, I'll say that probably includes the $5 million. Trubisky and Jackson gone right there gives you another $20 million. If Hayward restructures, that probably gets you another $7 to $8 million right there. All of a sudden you're up to $45 million of, workable cap that you can go and make those significant improvements that you think, go sign an inside linebacker that can start, a safety that can start, all these positions that could come in and start.
You have to replace those guys. Like, you get rid of a backup quarterback, you're going to have to sign one, like what Mitchell made last year is not that different from the going rate for a backup quarterback. So yeah, there's some savings, but I think some of that's going to get eaten up pretty quickly. Even just re-signing Terrell Edmonds probably going to cost more than you think it's going to cost,
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely right, but it just shows, if the Steelers want to make some big moves, that there are avenues to do that. It just depends on how ready they think they are, like we keep coming back to. if they're of our opinion, they need to make some more drastic moves to really improve the quality of this roster from top to bottom. So feel like we've been on the offseason plan here, kind of gone over the roster multiple times here. So we won't keep you guys any farther. Last thing I'll pose question to you guys. Who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl and why?
Oh, we're not okay. I was all prepared to roll out picks, but I
We
respect
can do picks too.
I respect your decision. It's already long. We've been
Yeah,
Corey, I'll give this to you first, man. You're
I'm gonna pick the Eagles because just like my Steelers preseason prediction, that was right. Will's was wrong. So I'm gonna stick with the Eagles.
How many did you get right in the poll this week, in the picks this week, Corey? Just out of
I
curiosity.
didn't even check.
Did you really not?
Nope. I haven't even set my picks for this week. I'll find out later.
I almost screenshotted it and sent it to you.
Sounds like I did really good.
Now, you remember the quarterback for the Steelers last year? You remember his number?
No, I don't think I do. Is that my place or my ranking that, or like my weekly place, or
Number you got right out of 16.
almost got to 50%.
You did not.
At least it's not like my week one where I got 4 right.
That's true. It was not your worst week of the year, so that's pretty good. Listen, as far as the Super Bowl is concerned, I think there's 2 big factors here. One is whoever gets out of the AFC, it's a freaking war.
Mhm.
And the NFC is more like San Francisco or Philly, right? That's what it feels like. But I feel like the AFC is. I don't even think we know yet exactly how bad it's going to be. Baltimore's actually got some stuff going on. They're a little bit of a mess. Now there's uncertainty as to whether or not Lamar is going to play in this first round game, which I think is a big problem for them. So I think especially since he won it last year, and they're not really. I mean, hard to convince me that they're worse team this year than they were last year. But the Chiefs have definitely taken a step back from where they were. They still have Mahomes. Buffalo, though, I think it's Buffalo out of the AFC. And just not only are they stacked, and do they have a great quarterback and great coaching, and solid defense, but this whole thing with DeMar Hamlin, I mean, I imagine they can ride that for a month and beat it to death. So I fully expect that to be a factor. And I think they're going to face San Francisco in the Super Bowl. Will win. I love
fighting Brock Purdy's.
I mean, I know I'm just saying, but maybe Brock Purdy won't. Well, that's a really bad pick. The rookie quarterbacks never make it to the Super Bowl. I will make it Philly against Buffalo, but I still like the Bills to figure out a way to weirdly eke that game out. They have disappointed many times before. There's some school of thought that Josh Allen is really bad in close games at the end of the game. So maybe Buffalo will have to make it so that it's not a close game. I don't know. It's hard to pick against. I wanted to be kind of contrarian and not also pick the Eagles, and I picked Buffalo a long time ago. So maybe this will be my same as every other prediction I made this year, and it will be wrong, and Corey will be right. How about you, Jeremy?
Call me crazy, but I like the 49ers. Their defense is just unreal. Their front seven makes it so hard for teams to do what they want to do. Their back end is not fantastic, but they get the job done. It's not pretty always, but they do. But honestly, the big thing to me is Brock Purdy has come in there and just been a stable force for them. He doesn't put up gaudy numbers as far as passing numbers, but he's thrown 2 touchdowns in every game he's played. Guys continue to have big games with him in there. Ayuk has looked much better. Kittle has exploded, with Brock Purdy under center because of all the things he can do to help out quarterbacks in that style of offense. But the big thing to me is if they get a healthy Deebo Samuel back, for the playoff run, I personally think that just pushes them over the top. That they are so hard to stop. They have such a good offensive line across the board, such a good defense across the board. That they're not the NFL's flashiest team by any means, but I think they are the best team in the NFL right now. So I like the 49ers personally. So
Yeah, it's hard to argue with any of that. Like I think, those are we know who the 5 best teams are. It's Philly, San Francisco, Buffalo, Kansas City, and Cincinnati, and it's just a function of like, is some other team that we're not expecting gonna like go on a playoff run? I guess I'll throw that question to you guys. If it's not going to be the team you picked, and it's not going to be one of those top 5 teams, which of the other 9 playoff teams has the best chance to make a playoff run?
ooh, that's a good one.
I'll go kind of off the wall with this one, really off the wall. But I think if you somehow get a healthy Tua and they play at the level they did for 2 periods of the season, I think the Dolphins with their weapons could knock off any team in the AFC. Now that's, there's a few ifs in there. It's if they play at that level, if they get Tua back. But, Waddle and Tyreek Hill are game breakers. I think if you can get those 2 back, or you can get those 2 rolling in a game, I'm not really sure how many offenses can keep up with those 2 if they're on.
I'm going to go the NFC, and pick a team that has gotten a lot of shit from this group included. But the Minnesota Vikings, I know that they are not the best team, but they have been hot at the right times. And if their offense can get going and their defense can just play enough to complement, that could be a dangerous team. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, really the addition of TJ Hawkinson over the last half of the year has given them a really nice, reliable third option, strong, running back group. That they're a team that that can put up enough fireworks to make games interesting. And with their what was it? I think they're 11-0 in 1-score games this year. If a game is close, they just always seem like they come out on top. So I'll take the Vikings as my off the wall favorite to win the Super Bowl. So that's a good question, Will.
I'm not sure the Vikings are going to make it out of the first round, but I hope that you're right for your sake. I would have taken. I think Miami is probably the choice I would have taken out of that bunch. But I guess since you picked the Vikings, and the choice of the Dolphins is gone. I guess the infatuation with the Los Angeles Chargers, could they suddenly put it all together unexpectedly? That would be very like Steelers Giants kind of
I didn't even think of them.
Put it together at for the postseason better than they played in the regular season in a way. So I guess that's theoretically possible. That like the matchups are a big part of this. The Chargers go to Jacksonville, young team. Yeah, they're on paper. Jacksonville's a better football team, maybe, possibly, or at least as good. But I kind of think, first time playing playoff football. I don't know. Maybe I get the Chargers a puncher's chance to make it to the title game if they happen to get the right matchups.
Yeah, so lots of different ways things can unfold in the playoffs. So with that being said, thank you, gentlemen, for what's been a long and arduous season as Steeler fans, from the start of an improbable win into Cincinnati to one of the longer skids we've seen as Steelers fans in quite some times, to finishing out the year 6-1, and Mike Tomlin still holding on to that dumb freaking record of never having a losing season.
We're gonna have to hear about it again for at least another year.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we're gonna hear about it for the rest of our lifetimes, I think, unfortunately. But with that being said, that wraps up another Steelers season. So had its up and downs, but it was fun along the way to a degree. with that being said, thank you, Steeler fans, for being with us all year long through the ups and the downs, the pains, the sorrows, the brief enjoyments that we've had. My
And we'll
name
be back before you know it with draft coverage. It's like it's not that long. It's not that far away before we'll be heavy duty into the draft.
Yeah, don't fret, Steeler fans. You know, still some football to be played, but there is never not enough football coverage when it comes to your Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm your host, Jeremy Coleman. Thank you again, Will and Corey, for all your guys' dedication and effort to helping me make this podcast go every week throughout the season. Steeler fans, thank you for sticking with us. With that being said, here we go to the off season. Hopefully you can enjoy some playoff football, have a nice big Super Bowl party, eat too many wings or pizza or whatever you want to do, and try to enjoy the off season. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Steelers news that we will still touch on for you. So with that being said, thank you and have a good rest of your year.
Ciao, go Steelers.